The topic that we are going to talk today is man's ultimate freedom and responsibility. And this is something that is based on the very famous philosophy of Viktor Frankl, which is called logotherapy. Now, just for the introduction, I'm a certified logotherapist. I practice as a life coach in Dubai, and I travel regularly and I meet a lot of people, and I do coaching regularly with clients based on the philosophy of logotherapy. So some of the participants last week were very interesting because they actually were involved with logotherapy in some way or the other, and that kind of made the session quite interesting as well. I hope some of you would probably know about logotherapy or would be reading a very famous book by the author by the name of Man's Search for Meaning. We'll be talking more about that in the session. So let's start off. Okay, my presentation has got a little stuck, I guess. So there's always some kind of an issue or the other that comes by. Okay, fair enough. So there is Dr. Viktor Frankl. He is a German psychiatrist who lived during the World War II. He is the founder and author of, or the creator of the school of psychology called logotherapy. Now, for us to understand what logotherapy is all about, it is important for us to understand what are the various schools of psychology that exist in this world. So the first school of psychology that actually exists was created by the founder of modern day psychology, Sigmund Freud. And he spoke about the fact that everything that human beings do revolve around the whole idea of seeking pleasure. So whenever human beings are going through any kind of trouble in their lives, any kind of challenges in their lives, or any kind of misery that's happening in their lives, if we are able to see pleasure at the end of this journey, this misery, this suffering, then human beings will very happily go through the entire episode. This notion of seeking pleasure or showing pleasure in solving mental health issues was challenged by a student of Sigmund Freud, whose name is Dr. Alfred Adler. And Adler created a new school of psychology by the name of individual psychology, where he said that it was not pleasure that human beings were going after, but the whole idea of seeking power. And it could be any kind of power: monetary power, physical power, mental power, emotional power, power in a relationship, or so on and so forth. So any kind of power that you show the human being, he will go through his journey of life, his suffering, his misery, and everything that life challenges that life is throwing at him. Now, Viktor Frankl was interestingly a student of Alfred Adler. And for a very long time, almost the first 10 years of his life, he practiced as an individual psychologist, working very closely with Alfred Adler to develop that school of psychology, which focused on seeking power. But as he was working with actual clients, he realized that it was not pleasure that people were going after. It was certainly not power that people were going after. But the first thing that anybody would ask is, why did this happen to me? What is the reason? What is the meaning of this whole episode that has taken place in my life? So he started creating and working on a new school of psychology, which he called as the meaning therapy, or the meaning psychology, which eventually became logotherapy. The logotherapy, the word logos, logo comes from the Greek word logos, which actually means meaning. So Frankl worked very hard to actually come up with theories and arrive at a school of psychology which focused on understanding the meaning of what was happening in life. Because Frankl's observation, in simple terms, was when life throws a challenge at you, you don't say, okay, now the challenge has come, I'm going to seek something out of it. Maybe I'll seek pleasure, or maybe I will get power. The first question that comes to human mind is, why did this happen? What was the meaning of this? What is the reason for me to having to go through this whole episode? And that made a lot of difference to an individual's life. So Frankl came to a conclusion that if you know the why of your life, everything else falls into place. So logotherapy is a school of psychology that helps to understand on the why of life, on the meaning of life. And this aspect of life, this aspect of psychology became very popular with a recent Japanese book, with a book which is based on a Japanese philosophy called Ikigai, which actually talks about finding the meaning of life itself and credits Viktor Frankl for actually inspiring them to write and research and write the book itself. So the whole idea about finding the why, finding the meaning of life, finding the reasons why things are happening in your life will give us comfort. And as a logotherapist, it is something that I do, and a lot of my fellow logotherapists work on, is to help individuals identify what is happening in their life. Now, Frankl was working on this entire theory, on this entire concept of logotherapy, and he actually wrote a lot of these theories and created a book which he was carrying with him when he was arrested by the Nazis in the Second World War, and he was sent into a concentration camp. And when he reached the concentration camp, he and his wife both were taken prisoners, and they were both separated on day one. And he had a transcript of this book with him. He was carrying notes that he was planning to publish very soon. And the day he was arrested, this book was torn into pieces in front of his eyes by the person who took him in the concentration camp. And that became technically one of the main reasons why Frankl survived through the 2.5 years of the concentration camp. Because he writes in the book that there were two major whys for him that he realized that he had to fulfill in his life, two major meanings of his life. One was he wanted to reunite with his wife, and his wife was pregnant at that point of time. And he never knew, but unfortunately, the wife was executed in the very first week of her arrest. But he never knew this. So 2.5 years, he actually made this as his why, as his meaning, to wake up every morning and live through the misery that life was throwing at him, because he always kept thinking about reuniting with his wife and his child. The second important reason, or the meaning why he was able to go through the suffering, was he had a clear objective of rewriting this book, which he actually did in the concentration camp very secretly. He would hide across from the eyes of the soldiers, and he would start penning the notes again. So by the time he came out of the concentration camps after 2.5 years, he actually had the whole book again ready with him. Interestingly, during the entire period that he was in the camps, he actually adopted and applied a lot of principles of logotherapy on his own life, and also encouraged his fellow inmates to actually utilize some of these concepts in their life. He actually was able to see many people actually gaining strength and belief that they would make it out safe and sound when they practiced certain therapies that are defined in logotherapy. And telling people to actually think of a why, have a reason, have a purpose as to why you want to go out and of this camp. That helped a lot of people actually come out of this misery as well. So when he came out, other than the fact that he had the logotherapy Bible, so to say, with him, he actually wrote his entire autobiography of his days in the concentration camp and how he applied some of these concepts of logotherapy into action. And that became the book called Man's Search for Meaning, which was voted as one of the 100 most influential books of the 20th century by the US Congress. Even today, Man's Search for Meaning is recommended by most business leaders, by most philosophical readers, and people who are interested in self-help, self-care, and mental health, and industry professionals like me who deal with mental health issues. It's a very small, tiny book. If somebody wants to read it, You can actually finish the book in practically a day or two. But I must warn you, it's a very heavy book for some people to read, because everybody is able to take the visual effect and understand the visuals of how miserable and how dreadful the environment was in which Frankl survived for 2.5 years. And so be very careful when you pick up the book, because if you have issues in reading really gross material, you will find this a little not acceptable to read. But then there are audiobooks in case if you would like to read those. And then there are various videos that have been made across on Viktor Frankl explaining the meaning, explaining the philosophy, including several videos that I have made, which are part of my YouTube channel as well. So what is this logotherapy all about? So before we talk about the topic of our discussion today, I want to kind of give you a gist of what are the three basic pillars of logotherapy. Number one, there is meaning in everything that happens in life. Nothing in life is without a purpose. Nothing in life is without a meaning. There will be times when we would get to know the meaning of that particular episode that's happening in our life immediately. There will be times when we would probably know about it in a few days, in a few weeks, in a few months, in a few years. And there'll be certain things which we would never know the reason why it happened. But in the large scheme of things, there is a reason for everything taking place. It's all interconnected. And that is what makes logotherapy different from other schools of psychology, because while we are still a school of psychology, we have an element of spirituality in us. We have an element of linkage to the cosmic universe, to the unknown universe, that there's a lot of research that is going on in that area, in cosmic science and so on and so forth. But Frankl believed that there are certain things in life that human beings would never find answers to. And the fact is, at that stage, it is better for us to accept our limitations and stop thinking too much or stop stressing too much about things we do not know about. And so the first point is there is meaning in everything that happens in life. Number two, as a human being, we are constantly looking for that meaning. And it is a reality. Anything that happens in our life, good or bad, we always, usually in bad times, we ask this question, why did this happen to me? In good times, it's rare that this question will come to us immediately, but at some stage in our life, we would ask this question, why did this happen to me? Why did this such a good thing happen in my life, right? Because we're enjoying the fruit of what the good things bring to us. But the moment there's a bad thing, we want to analyze it. We want to decode it. We want to understand what is the real meaning of something that is happening. So as human beings, we are constantly looking for that. Number three, the way each one of us perceives the meaning is different from one another and based on several factors. And that makes each one of us unique. Now, what are we made of? We are made up of so many combinations. Our genetic structure determines the way we look and the way we present ourselves, the country we were born in, the culture we were part of, the family we were part of, whether we were born to single parents, whether we were raised in an environment of a joint family, whether we had parents who had separated, whether we grew up in adopted homes, and so on and so forth. That will determine the way we think as well. What kind of school did we go to? What did we learn? What were our learnings from our teachers? What were the subjects that were taught to us? Were we more into sports, or were we more into art and creative side, or were we more into academics, right? Then as we grew up, what kind of friend circle did we choose to have? What is it that we actually studied eventually in the universities? What kind of career path we took? What kind of books we started reading? What kind of jobs we do? What kind of bosses we have? What kind of colleagues we have at office? What kind of movies we watch? What kind of books we read? What kind of groups we attend to, right? All of this will have an impact in the way we think and we look at the meaning of life. People who are more involved in psychology or who are more involved in philosophy will look at life very differently. People who are involved with economics will look at life very differently, right? I can give you my own example. Before I introduced to logotherapy in 2018, I was a very different person. I was a very money-oriented, money career-oriented person, right? Everything for me, all decisions for me revolved around my career and my financial decisions, or my financial status, right? But after 2018, when I got introduced to logotherapy and I read Viktor Frankl, and then when I went on to do a postgraduate degree in logotherapy and existential analysis, as I read more and more about Frankl, uh, I almost read almost around 20 books out of the 39 books that he's written in his lifetime. The more research I did, the more calm and quiet I have become. At the same time, I have now stopped looking at life from a perspective of money or economics. I always look for something positive that happens in life. I always believe that there must be a reason. So the moment you start believing there is a reason for something that's happening in life, you tend to enjoy it much more. Rather than fighting a situation, you start going with the situation and start enjoying what the situation is to offer you in the best manner possible. So the way each one of us will look at a meaning is very different because of various factors as we spoke about. And that means that for every individual, there has to be a unique way of handling his or her mental health issues. It cannot be a generic medicine that, okay, you end up taking this medicine and you'll be fine. Most of the psychiatrists and psychologists, usually the psychiatrists who actually recommend medication for problems like anxiety or depression or addiction for that matter, they just go with the generic flow. They are like, okay, this has helped several other people and is likely to help you. If you decode the meaning of what happened to you in your life and why do you get anxiety or why do you get depression or why have you got into addiction in the first place, if you're able to identify the crux of it, you might be able to deal with it in a much, much better format. Having said so, coming to the topic that we wanted to do today, and I wanted to give you a brief introduction about logotherapy because it was important for you to understand the background of where it comes from. Today's topic is all about freedom and responsibility. And Frankl has extremely strong opinions about freedom and responsibility. So the first thing that Frankl believes is the fact that as a human being, we are not free at all. We don't take birth on our own free will. Somebody else decides that. We don't, we don't wear or we don't eat what we choose or what we want to when we are kids. It's usually our parents who decide everything for us. Nobody comes and asks us which school you want to go to, whether you even want to go to a school. Are you ready to go to a school or not? But no, we are just thrown into this whole system that the world has actually created around us and said, okay, now from now on, you need to go to a school. As we are growing, it is our school that decides a lot of things for us. Our grades that decide which college are we going to get into. We may want to go to one college, but we are forced to go to another one because we don't have the necessary grades. Many times we are forced to take up studying what we don't really like or what we don't want to study in the first place. A lot of things are decided by other people. It's the same at workplaces. 90% of the clients that I meet on a regular basis have complaints about their work and that they are not happy. Now, if somebody is not happy, then why are you there? But then there are compulsions. You are forced to be in a job because you have bills to pay, you have a family to feed. At the same time, you may not be able to enjoy that job just because you're doing it not out of your own free will, but you're just forced to do it. Right? So a lot of things in life we just do because we have to do them. We are forced to do them, right? And we're not really free in the real sense of the term. 100% of us, if we are given this option that, do you want to press a reset button in your life? And we would all say yes. If we are given that freedom to choose now, we will all say yes. But are we really free in the real sense of the term? The answer is no, because everything else is decided around by what's happening around you. There are people around you, situations around you, institutions around you, governments around you that decide what you are free for and what you're not. It's a simple philosophy, right? A lot of us live in countries where we are privileged to live in countries which we call as free. We can do what we want, we can go where we want, we can wear what we want, we can walk into any restaurant, eat what we want to eat. We can do a lot of things that we really want to do. Right? But in the real sense of the term, is that true freedom? Because at the end of the day, I may want to go and eat sushi today, for example, and I walk into a restaurant, I eat the best of the sushi available there. I don't feel like paying. Is that fine? It's not, because you're bound to pay for what you're using. That's not true freedom. So yes, while I'm free to go to a restaurant, but I'm forced to pay because I that's the way the economics work around it. So similarly, there are lots of things that just bind us. We feel we are free, but in reality, we are not. And Frankl believes that everything can be taken away from man, but only one of the last of human freedoms. It is the right to choose the attitude that we want to have towards a given set of circumstances. It's the right to choose one's own way. So when most of the clients come to me and cry about the fact that, we hate our job, we hate our boss, we hate our colleagues, we don't feel like going, what is the choice you have in your hand? You either choose to stay with it or simply walk away from it. Now, if you have chosen to walk away from it, then fine, you have to enjoy it. That's the real freedom now that you've got. Most of these youngsters today, or most of the people who are in the startup culture, they tend to enjoy, as they claim, they tend to enjoy the freedom because they're not bound by the working hours, by the rules and regulations of the office environment, by their bosses and all of that kind of stuff. Yes, in a way, it is some amount of freedom that they are enjoying in their lives. But if you've chosen to stick around with a particular job and you have reasons for it, you have your why, you have your meaning for it, then why are you sitting and crying about it? Then in that case, if you've accepted that this is something that I really need to do, then why don't you enjoy what you're doing? Why do you want to keep cribbing about it all the time? So I will explain this whole idea with a simple example. I had a client who came to me last year, and she was going through a really bad phase in her career, and kept on telling me that how she wants to quit her job, and she's really feels that she's wasted her life on this job, etc. She was from the banking sector, and she spent 18 years of her life actually as a banker. And it wasn't that she was in a very small position. She was a vice president at a bank, at a prominent bank based in Dubai. And she came to me with this whole thing that, I think I've wasted 18 years of my life. I shouldn't be in banking. I am great at music. I want to go out and make music and all of that kind of stuff. It was a simple Q&A session that we had. So we have in logotherapy something known as the Socratic dialogue. It is where we actually encourage people to answer their own questions, right? And when we started doing that dialogue, I asked her a simple question: that why did you choose to be in banking in the first place when you feel you don't want to be a banker? Her answer was her father was a banker and he forced her to get into it. Okay. The next question: did the father literally teach her banking, literally pushed her into the school, literally locked her up in a school and said, now you learn banking? She said, no. It was out of her own choice that she chose to go with what her father really wanted her to do. I asked her, did she enjoy her sessions in the banking school? The answer was yes. She really loved those years while she was learning about banking. She spent 18 years of her life in working for several banks, and she became a vice president. And now she feels that 18 years of banking career were a waste of her life. I mean, she then goes on to say, to admit that this job gave her the financial freedom that she always wanted. It introduced her to her husband, who she's happily married with and has two lovely children. That all happened because of the banking job. She made wonderful friends. She made great career strides. She won several awards. So how today she's come to a conclusion that 18 years of her life were a waste. Now, this realization for her was a turning point because she suddenly now felt more grateful towards this whole situation that she was going through. She realized that probably her time had come to make a choice. And she was able to make that choice of walking away from her career now because the career had given her financial stability and the ability to make that choice now. So now she was free to make that decision that I don't want to do banking anymore and I want to quit and become a musician. Now, just for the update, she actually left her job very recently and she's now decided to pursue music and wants to go and learn music forward. But the fact is, you cannot really reach a stage in your life where you get frustrated with something and say, all of these years were a waste. You still have to maintain gratitude towards what the universe did for you, towards the circumstances. When the circumstances were good, you were really happy. You never said thank you for it. But when it became bad, you suddenly felt the entire universe was against you, which is actually not true. It is all about the way we look at it. What is the attitude we are having towards that situation? Yes, she was frustrated. She was probably saturated with her job and wanted a change. But just because she wanted a change doesn't mean that she has to negate all of what she did, the hard work that she did, and the success that she got in her life. So clearly the choice is the attitude. What is the attitude that you really have towards the circumstance that life is throwing at you, or the situation or the point in life that you are at? That's the only true freedom that we enjoy in life. Now, freedom is like a double-edged sword, as per what Frankl says, because freedom can really be taken for granted. Freedom can really be abused. And that's why Frankl advocated that responsibility is the essence of human existence. Humans are not simply the product of hereditary or the environment, but they are a combination of all that they have made and take responsibility for the decisions they have made and their own lives. If we are not responsible, they say your freedom ends where somebody else's freedom starts. You are equally responsible to safeguard somebody else's freedom. So responsibility is extremely important. Simple example of that restaurant. I can go eat sushi. That's my freedom. I can choose that today I want to go and eat sushi in a Japanese restaurant, but it is my responsibility to pay for it. I can choose to drive the car I want on the road. I can choose my road as well. Okay, fine. I'm going to drive from X point to Y point today. That's my choice. But I have to drive responsibly. I cannot cause accidents. I cannot cause hurt to other people. I have to follow the traffic rules. That's responsibility. Freedom cannot be enjoyed unless you are responsible for your own actions, unless you are responsible for your own decisions. And that is the true freedom to enjoy for anybody. So when we decide that we want to change a situation in our life, when we decide we want to do something new in our life, we always have to keep in mind that we need to be responsible for this new decision that we have taken as well, because this will define who we are. So after 18 years of working as a banker, if a lady decides that she wants to move on because she's free to take that decision and move into a new career, she now needs to also be responsible for the consequences of that, because she may not have the same amount of money coming in every day, every month. She may not have the same financial freedom that she probably had at one point of time. She would have to probably start cutting corners, or at the same time, she would have to see how she will make good with probably lesser income that's coming. And at the same time, she also needs to act responsibly, because whatever earnings she has made in the last so many years, she cannot just really go out and spend extravagantly and then say, I'm done with life. I don't have anything else left. Because if she's got a family, she's got children, she's got responsibilities, those will play a major role in terms of her decision, as well as once she's decided in terms of the responsibility that she needs to take for her decisions. So eventually, if you go to see, responsibility is something that's extremely critical for us to realize our true freedom of choice. Because our true freedom is not just to choose, it's also to be responsible. And that is something that Frankl talks about in several books of his. And he speaks of a term called responsibleness. He says freedom is not the last word. And like I said, his thought is very clear that freedom is only half part of the story, it's half of the truth. Because if somebody is given free speech, if somebody is told that you are free to do what you want to do, you have to also explain to that person that your freedom doesn't mean that you're going to go and hurt someone else. Your freedom doesn't mean that you will go and cause damage to somebody else. Your freedom ends where the other person's freedom starts. And that is why Frankl advocated a concept of responsibleness. And he spoke very openly about the fact that just like in America, there is a Statue of Liberty on the East Coast, which talks about responsibility. He advocated creating a statue of responsibility on the West Coast. And he said that this could be a very interesting for the world to understand that, yes, because he lived in America most of his life, he advocated that as Americans, as people who actually stand for democracy or freedom in this world, the world that we are free via a Statue of Liberty, we should also show the world that we are responsible enough by instituting a Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast. And it is actually very true, because in detail, if we go in depth information about responsibility and about freedom without taking the charge of our lives, without really taking the charge of our free will, of our free life, of the choices we want to make, our choices will also have to depend upon the fact that we don't hurt somebody else. And like Frankl said, each one of us is unique, each one of us is different, and hence each one of us needs to be respected for the way we are and for the humans that we are. So he advocated the Statue of Responsibility. And in fact, there is an organization, and I'm again want to give a disclosure here. It's not that I support the organization or anything of that sort. I just felt of bringing this up because there's actually an organization in the United States which is called the Statue of Responsibility Foundation, which has petitioned the US government for giving them permission to build a Statue of Responsibility. And it's a trust that operates, and it's working with several people to try and advocate building of this statue on the West Coast to complete the vision of Viktor Frankl and what he aspired to actually show out as a message to the world. So in short, freedom and responsibility is something that goes hand in hand. They cannot be separated. They cannot actually be they cannot actually be taken as individual pillars in itself. They're always joined together. They're always combined together. And every time we think about the choices we need to make, we also need to think about the consequences that will happen. And those consequences, a lot of time, stop us from taking those decisions or stop us from choosing what's really happening in our lives. But therapies like logotherapy and other therapies definitely help you to make better choices, to first understand your own self, and before you can actually go out to help others. So always aim to find what is giving you meaning in life. And if you're able to aim at that, then life becomes much more easier. If you know the why of your life, living that life becomes much more easier and better for everyone. That was a short presentation on logotherapy and freedom and meaning. I would be open to taking questions if there are any.